you check the children? Show a little match sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is what
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Well, hello there, Fright fans, and welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Jaime and Fuego, and so very stoked to be bringing you a new release review here for the channel, because in the midst of, excuse me, all of the bigger releases coming out around Thanksgiving, I mean, the Zootopia 2s, before that, Wicked for Good, you know, whatever else, there is a smaller British independent film that was just released and has some very legit lead power as far as just, you know, acting prowess goes in Benedict Cumberbatch, and this is for a film entitled The Thing with Feathers. Now, this is actually based on a book by Max Porter called Grief is the Thing with Feathers, and I suppose the title of the book that this is based on really gives you the indication as to the nature of this story, because of the fact that this is about a father who is now suddenly raising his two boys by himself because of the death of his wife. And so it is the three of them, but most notably him specifically, you know, just kind of navigating those different, sectors of grief and whatnot. And so we always like to give like overall thoughts and then segue briefly into story, acting, effects, and some of the filmmaking aspects and whatnot. And I wanted to make sure that I jumped to a few different bits here because there are some great quotes from this movie. This is directed, I believe, by what's the name of the director? Dylan Southern. And so Dylan Southern has actually pretty much the only feature stuff that he has directed previously is like concert sort of movies, and so he had done something for LCD Sound System. He did something for Oasis for this reunion tour that they are currently on, and a few other artists. But this is his like actual narrative feature debut, The Thing with Feathers. And so, I mean, despite the fact that it is a smaller indie sort of film, you could definitely tell that there was a lot of passion put into this, not just on the way that it was just impressively assembled on what feels like a much smaller budget, but also the fact that he was able to wrangle Benedict Cumberbatch. And so to get an actor of that caliber, you had to have something like really meaty for an actor of his esteem to chew on. This is not Doctor Strange sort of business. This is how Benedict really just made his name, both on stage and then on the screen. I mean, everybody knows him from, I believe Sherlock was like the big thing that put him on a lot of people's maps, the television series. But Benedict is terrific in this, and both of the boys, they have their moments of annoyance, but it's nothing to the degree of like Babadook. And the story, I mean, the editing is tremendous, as is the sound design, which really helps really get across just kind of how grief, and when your mind is so preoccupied, you're almost like a million miles a minute because of the fact that you try to focus on one thing and then you're immediately like wrenched into another frame of thinking because you're so overpowered by just the pain of what you're experiencing. And there's a really great quote, which is why I popped the phone back up, that I had to put on the dimmer while I was watching this and make sure to put this quote down. So where is it? Okay, I think we should talk about the difference between grief and despair. And that's because of the fact that time isn't really conveyed super directly in this film as I get into. So obviously overall, I was very impressed with this movie, and the fact that I will divulge a little bit more as we jump into story, because of the fact that there are some like practical kind of creature sort of stuff, whether it's actual or within our lead character's imagination. This is a non-spoiler review, obviously, but yeah, I was very impressed with this for a first-time narrative feature debut. Great performances, doing a lot on a smaller budget, and a lot of things taking place at one location. The flat where Benedict is continuing to try to raise these two boys by himself. Excellent performances. I mean, I was just very, very impressed with this. It's not full-blown horror. It's more on like the psychological thriller sort of vibe. But yes, it's a big recommend. But so story, yeah, as I already said, Benedict has lost his wife, and so he's dealing with the trauma and the grief, and as his therapist mentions to him, grief veering much more so into despair, because we do realize over the course of the film, which is broken up into a few different parts, it starts out with Dad, then it gets into Crow, we will get into that shortly, then Boys, and then lastly Demon. And so Benedict Cumberbatch's character is actually a comic artist and perhaps writer. I'm trying to remember if he's like a one-man show, if they actually clarified that or not. But he does what I could only describe as like these like charcoal sort of drawings, which are incredibly impressive. And that's where I can make the Babadook kind of connotation a little bit too, with, you know, just like the black grays and whites and everything. But yeah, just incredible artist. And there is a crow that he seems to draw a lot. Perhaps it's a fixture in a lot of his work, or maybe just the graphic novel, although it's really funny, he hates them being called graphic novels. He's like, it sounds kind of pretentious or whatever, as his kids clarify when he's at a social setting at one particular point. But so whether the crow is a fixture of just this piece of work, or like just been in a lot of almost like a fixture or a motif or whatever that he likes to utilize, as he is dealing with everything, just the onslaught of emotion, he has first and foremost like the voice of the crow just badgering him and berating him and calling him, you know, just this sad, pathetic, you know, widower of a husband who's not capable of raising his boys and everything. And so he has what is initially like, you know, just this internal sort of voice that is trying to just badger him and almost like take control, and then it does begin to visually manifest. And that's why publications like Bloody Disgusting are even covering this film in the first place, because it does veer into just the uncertainty of, has this taken on true physical form? Is it that sort of narrative? Is it all within his head? How much is this affecting his boys as they are observing kind of the torment and the downward spiral of their father, when he's supposed to be the steadfast, strong sort of presence as they're going through everything too? And so, yeah, I don't really want to divulge too much more, but it is much more on the drama, psychological thriller side is the one thing. Don't go in expecting like full-on creature craziness, whether it's real or just in Benedict's character's head. But I was just impressed with the way that it very tactfully kind of, you know, left you with a sense of uncertainty. And the acting, as I already praised, you know, Benedict is great. He has some tender moments with his boys, and then he also has other moments where he is just so lost, and without speaking any dialogue, whether it's him just like pounding a bottle of booze, or just, you know, sitting and smoking and just the blank staring as the gears are turning in his head, he can convey so much emotion just with a look in this. And that is what a lot of, you know, European thespians who have just had so much time on stage are able to do, and like significantly better than a lot of American actors, at least in my estimation. He has a few interactions with a few other adults, but, you know, whether his deceased wife's parents, which is very awkward. There's also, I think, some of his like agents or like comic book publishers or whatever. So there's like a few scenes here and there. The one with his therapist where I mentioned the difference between grief and despair. But I mean, really, it is the acting showcase of Benedict, and even some of the physical acting that he does, where he's almost like taking on some embodiments and like mannerisms of how a crow would actually move, and, you know, sounds and things. I mean, it's really, really intense, man, and really impressive. And yet a lot of this wouldn't necessarily work as well if not for the adept aspect of the filmmaking here. Cinematography is great. The claustrophobic aspects of like his creative room, where he does all of his drawing and where he kind of tells his boys to just leave him in isolation during a number of instances, but also like the editing and the sound design are what really add just a feeling of anxiousness and just being on edge, because there's a lot of like really quick hyper edits where whether it's like a waking, like sort of hallucination dream sort of bit. I mean, almost like Jacob's Ladder sort of vibes, you know, the exceptional Tim Robbins film. And then, you know, Benedict like kind of snaps out of it, and the quickness of the edits too. So how much was he experiencing in actuality and physical form or whatever? And also the sound design of how just the mixing and the panning of everything from, you know, this booming, deep, dark, cynical voice of this crow, and even to like veering into the practical effects and stuff. Like there is creature work that is done in this. Now there's not an abundance. That's once again where I don't want to, you know, just burden you with the, you know, expectation or anything, but there is like a big giant crow that is in scenes in this movie, and it's shown in the trailer, so that's not me spoiling anything. and it looks pretty damn good, man. You know, and there is just like the movements are just like menacing and sinister and really cool. And so I was really impressed with the creature effects as well and stuff. And so I mean, it just really, it embodies so many different nuances of navigating grief and how it just clouds. It's like a storm cloud that is keeping any rays of sunshine from, you know, kind of coming in and just illuminating any sort of light and hope, you know, in the midst of the situation. And the fact that, you know, even the flat is just so dank and dark, and there's not a lot of like brightly lit areas of their home, you know, that him and his boys are still residing in. And there's even a couple other like really awesomely edited scenes where he is remembering, Benedict's character specifically remembering back to when his wife was sick before she passed away, and the fact that he had to watch the two boys at one point in time himself, and he was doing a real just like terrible job of it. And it's when he had his first essence of second guessing whether he could really parent them on his own. And this was long before, you know, his wife's passing and stuff. So, I mean, from a technical standpoint, you know, from the design of this big crow and some of the other things that we get in the third act, as stuff really ramps up and gets more into the side of the spooktacular. I don't know, for a first-time feature narrative filmmaker in Dylan Southern, this was a definite win. Unfortunately, I was the only person in the theater on it was Friday or Saturday of this weekend, so prime viewing time. I was the lone soldier in there. I know Jason Smith from Sinister Cinema said that, you know, he was in an empty theater as well. So anyway, guys, this is a definite recommend, and yet just don't go in expecting something full-blown scarific. This is much more a character study and a splendidly assembled one, both in the technical department and in the acting department. So I extend the grande gracias up in Jaime and Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. You guys know the drill. If you've watched this far, thank you so very much. Thanks to all of our patrons. Greatly appreciated there. Liking, sharing, subscribing. You know how all of this stuff goes. But that's going to do it, everybody. Once again, I've been Fuego. Y'all have been Rad Status. And until next time, Freight fans, remember, stay scared.